For more on the developments surrounding President Trump, we turn to Philip Bump, national correspondent for The Washington Post. Philip, good morning.
Good morning, sir. As
we said, the Post reporting this morning that Jared Kushner wanted a secret communications channel with the Kremlin. New York Times reporting that the Kushner camp is saying that was to open up a dialogue about Syria. Does this all make sense?
I mean, lots of things make sense today that wouldn't have made sense 2 years ago. I mean, this is an extremely unusual move, certainly. The Post reporting suggests that Kushner, in this conversation with Ambassador Kislyak, suggested, among other possibilities, that perhaps they might be able to use facilities at the Russian embassy in Washington, which, prompts this very bizarre idea of Kushner walking into the Russian embassy without somehow attracting attention from the American authorities. The real question here is why they would make this request. And I think part of the overarching question here is why the incoming administration was so distrustful of the administrations already in place, of the government intelligence agencies. And I think that's a question that the FBI is trying to figure out.
Adam Entis, one of the reporters on this story, told CBSN yesterday that this sort of fits a pattern within the Trump administration, which is denial, downplay, and that there's always subsequent revelation. Reuters is reporting that there are several other contacts that Jared Kushner made with Sergei Kislyak that have been undisclosed. What more can we expect, and how do you think this informs the ongoing investigations?
Well, it's very hard to say what else we can expect. I mean, obviously, there are lots of things that are being investigated and being revealed all the time. We're seeing this pattern over the course of the past several weeks. I mean, I think the real question here is how the Trump administration can move forward with this cloud hanging over it of the Russia investigation, which all indications are that Trump wants to move past this as rapidly as possible, but they keep doing these things. Like, these things keep coming out about things that weren't reported, and the administration is not doing a good job.
Do you think this informs Jared Kushner's security clearance to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are valid questions about how much pressure Congress is going to start putting on the administration to get Jared Kushner further away from the administration. I mean, obviously, Jared Kushner is in a very unique place. He is not only a senior advisor of the president, he is a relative of the president's. Yeah. That's one of the reasons he's so trusted, and it makes this a very particularly tricky issue for the president.
The president was hoping this foreign trip would distract from this other news.
Right.
Has he had any success on that front, do you think?
Well, he's had some success. I mean, there are certainly headlines about what he's been doing overseas. Not all those headlines have been glowing either. But, I mean, it really is just over the course of the past 2 weeks. We've seen all these revelations, starting probably with the Post report on Monday of last week about the fact that he had revealed this classified information in conversation with the Russians. It's hard to get past that without there being a full investigation in America, understanding really what happened. And unfortunately for President Trump, investigations like that are very slow, and we're still at the front end of it.
Philip, the foreign trip would seem to be a point at which the White House had hoped to pivot, right, to the offense. And yet they come back to these Russia revelations. They're also coming back to a Congressional Budget Office score on the Republican plan that was passed in the House to repeal the Affordable Care Act and replace it with the American Health Care Act, which would leave 23 million Americans without health insurance. Right. How much is that an issue for this White House this week?
I'm not sure it's a huge issue for the White House this week, in part because the White House has not been terribly hands-on with any policy stuff. I mean, they got involved at the tail end of the AHCA when it was being fought in the House, trying to put pressure on Republicans to try and get them to actually switch their votes. Right now, it looks like all of the action on that health care bill is in the Senate itself. I'm not sure that Donald Trump wants to weigh in very heavily at this point because it's extremely tricky. They're trying to get this passed through the Senate with only a 50-vote margin, which requires very specific rules for them to be able to do that. That, combined with public pressure from the outside based on that 23 million uninsured, it's going to be very hard for them to do that. I'm not sure Donald Trump wants to get involved in that.
Quickly, Philip, a lot of reports of staff shakeups in the White House. What are you hearing?
And one of the things we're hearing is potentially two campaign staffers, Corey Lewandowski and David Bossie, coming back into the White House. They're trying to set up, apparently, according to Reuters, this internal communications team led by Bannon and Kushner, which I think is an unusual choice given that they are part of the communications problem.
All right, Philip Bump, thanks very much for being with us this morning.